Hi, welcome to our webinar and welcome to the Coping Well During COVID series. We're really excited to see that so many of you have signed up for our webinar today. So welcome. And for those of you that haven't met me before, my name is Emily Gardner and I'm a cognitive behavioural therapist and I work for the NHS in London. And I have been trained to support people who are experiencing common mental health difficulties such as anxiety and depression, and have been involved in the development of this series of webinars. So before we get started, it would be really helpful for you to know how to use the question and answer function, as we're going to use it a couple of times throughout the webinar today. So first of all, if you have a look on your screen, and in the top right hand corner you'll find the question mark for Q&A. So if you click on that, and then it will give you an option to enter your name. We would prefer that you click on the small arrow to remain anonymous, but if you do really want to put your name in, then if you could just put your first name, that would be good. And then you can enter your question here and then click on the arrow to send. However, if we ask you a question, as we will throughout the webinar, please respond here. So instead of putting in your question, just type your response. We will also have a couple of polls that we'd like you to respond to. And if you scroll into the comments, you'll find the options. So you just press like on the one that is relevant to you. Each of your responses or questions are going to be moderated, so they won't be published immediately. So they may take a few moments to appear. If you do wish to keep one of your questions private for the moderators only, then please just add private at the beginning of your question or comment, and that conversation that you have will remain private and won't be published. We may not get time to answer everyone's questions or respond to everyone. We will try our best within the time of the webinar, and thank you very much. Okay, well, let's start by having a go. So please let us know who you are here for. So you may be here for yourself. So if you are, go into the option, the Q&A, and scroll up until you find the option A for yourself. If you're here for a family member or friend who is struggling, then find option B and click on the thumbs up. If you're here as a professional, then please click on option C. And if there's another reason why you're here and it's not one of these, then please choose D. And I'll have a look at your responses in a few moments. So this series of webinars has been designed to help you to cope with the coronavirus, well, at least the impact caused by the coronavirus. And the theme of these webinars has been changing every week. So if this is your first webinar, we have a number of other webinars that may be of use to you that are focusing on different ways which the coronavirus might be impacting on your mental health. And the first step of each webinar is understanding why your mood might be impacted, followed by some really useful strategies and techniques to help you to manage the way that you're feeling. So let's have a look at who you're here for today. So I'm just going to have a look at the Q&A now and see who most of you are here for. And I can see without doubt most of you are here for yourself. So welcome, and I really hope that you find this webinar useful in helping you to manage working from home. Okay, so another question for you today. What do you hope to get out of this webinar? This question will be really helpful for me to understand kind of what has brought you here and what you would like to get out of the webinar. So please share that using the Q&A now. So I'll tell you a little bit about what to expect, give you a bit of an idea. So the series of webinars has been designed to give you a toolkit, essentially, of evidence-based resources, ideas and tools to help you manage the challenges that you're facing, particularly at the moment with working from home. And the content of all of the webinars is based on cognitive behavioural therapy, which is a very effective treatment for depression or anxiety. And the premise of cognitive behaviour therapy is that it focuses on making changes to our thoughts and our behaviours with the hope that we can improve how we feel. In today's webinar, we're going to be considering the challenges of home working, and we really want to help you find a really good home working life balance, and maybe some tips and strategies to help you to separate working from home and work from your home life despite working from your home. So today we want you to go away with some strategies to help you manage working from home a bit better, and hopefully switch off from work as well and enjoy your time outside of work a bit more. So let's look at your hopes for the webinar. And so I'm just going to have a look now. Hints and tips, lovely. I want to find out how to balance working from home and personal life, how to cope with continuing working from home during the corona situation. Anything will be useful, brilliant. How to retain a work-life balance when work and home and life are blurred by working from home, to get some helpful hints and tips to share with colleagues to help them cope with issues surrounding working in the current climate. Brilliant. So all of these hopes we'll be covering in today's webinar. So to help me leave work behind at the end of the day, and to manage current life, skills to use with client session. Excellent. So yeah, I think thank you for sharing your hopes, and I won't have time to look through them all, but hopefully you'll go away with those hopes being met and some really useful hints and tips and strategies that will help you manage working from home. Okay, so what are you finding the most difficult about working from home? So you're all here for a reason, and perhaps that's because you weren't expecting to work from home, and it's not necessarily been your choice to work from home. And so as a result of that, there may be a number of difficulties or challenges that you're finding as a result of working from home. So please share, using the Q&A function, some of the things that you have found difficult about working from home. And I just wanted to highlight how difficult this time has been, and it has been a period of uncertainty that none of us have ever been through anything like this before. And so it is important to recognise that this pandemic might be bringing up a roller coaster of emotions, and we may feel really overwhelmed by the level of uncertainty that we're faced with. And it may be that we're finding that we're worrying a lot more than usual, or we may feel more stressed than we were feeling before. And that might mean that we're more irritable than usual, or perhaps we're finding that we're angry more often. You might feel fine one moment, but overwhelmed the next. And emotions like these are normal and, to be honest, expected because of the changes that we've been through. And we have had to make a lot of changes to prevent the spread of the virus. And whilst these changes have been absolutely necessary for our physical health, they have had an unfortunate impact on our mental health. We've had a lot of disruption to our day-to-day routines and activities, and that can have a knock-on effect on our mood and how we feel. We may be finding that we're under financial pressure, and that's going to have a knock-on effect on our anxiety levels and also our mood as well. And so as a result of all of this, we can be left feeling frustrated or even a little hopeless and helpless. So it's really important to recognise that these emotions are normal because we're going through such a difficult time, and in some ways to be expected. And some of you may be really struggling right now and feel like you have nowhere to turn. And whilst we really want this webinar to be educational and supportive, we also wanted you to know where you can turn for immediate support. So if you're having thoughts of suicide or of harming yourself in any way, then it's really important that you seek help. So we recommend the Samaritans. They are a fantastic organisation who you can call and talk to at any time of day or night. And you can call them on 116 123 completely free. We will provide more information at the end of this webinar about further support that might be available to you. And if you want to find this number at any point during the webinar, you'll find it at the very top of the Q&A. So if you scroll right to the top, you'll find it there as the very first published announcement. So let's have a look at some of the things that you're finding difficult about working from home. Isolation, virtual working, not being able to switch off, routine, perhaps a lack of routine, not having face-to-face contact, overworking, lack of interaction and exercise, keeping motivated at times, feeling lonely and disconnected, and the line between work and home life becoming blurry, switching off at the end of the day with no real change between work and home, resisting the urge to work at weekends, distractions, backache, jobs to be done in the home and trying to juggle while working throughout the day, not being able to see colleagues face to face, not being able to switch off, trying to manage childcare whilst working from home, being present but not being present, my husband being in the house / same room with me, small space and interfering with partner and bedroom, switching from work to parenting, lack of face-to-face interaction with colleagues, a lot of difficulties that are kind of overlapping here that are common between all of us, and I think that's really important to recognise, is that we're all feeling very alone in and isolated as a result of home working, but actually it's almost like we're all alone in feeling alone. We're not alone in feeling alone, that's what I meant to say. And it is really difficult, and some of the difficulties that you've shared here, I've experienced working from home myself. So if you go through and have a look at some of the other comments that people have posted, and if you felt the same way, then just like it. Just click on the thumbs up there, just to kind of share with that person that you've also felt this way and that's something that you've struggled with. And hopefully we can share the fact that we've been struggling with the same things and it's been difficult for all of us. But also want to let you know that a lot of what you've talked about we're going to be covering today in our webinar. So hopefully it will give you some really useful things to try and make some changes to improve things for you. So I pulled together some of my own ideas about some of the challenges that we might be facing working from home. So one of the things that we might be struggling with is managing our time. And it's funny because remote workers need to be self-motivated and in some ways need to be experts at time management, because we don't have others constantly overlooking us or managing our time for us. And everyone's different in their kind of approach to time management. And so some people might find it easy to stick to a schedule and manage their to-dos, whereas other people might find it harder. But it's especially challenging for remote workers who do have more flexible working time. Another difficulty is that inability to switch off from work. It is really hard to see where your work ends and your leisure time begins, and it's easy to let it merge. And so we spend a lot more time overall at work with gaps in between, or we feel guilty for taking breaks so that we actually end up spending more time at work. Which leads on to our other point, which is working too much. And one of the reasons many managers don't approve of remote working is because they fear that employees will slack off. However, often it's the opposite. That tends to be the reality, and remote workers often overwork. When your personal life and your work life are under the same roof, it is much harder to switch off, and it's much easier to just check your emails or work on a project while you're doing other things, and so it does make it more difficult. Another challenge is the interruptions. So you have family, pets, and a doorbell as well. Those are other challenges to contend with. The benefit is obviously you don't have co-workers dropping by your desk and other office interruptions, but it means that we have to deal with all of these other kind of interruptions that can distract us. And if you're in the middle of a project and you keep getting distracted from it, it's really hard to get in deep with a project. So that might be one of the challenges that you're finding. And it's also especially hard if you do have very young children who don't understand. They might be able to see you, but they don't know that they find it hard to understand that you're not available to play with them. And repeatedly saying no, that you can't, is painful for you and for them. And so that can be a challenge. Another one is loneliness and the lack of human interaction, especially if you don't have family members at home with you. And so it can be really difficult because it might feel very lonely and isolated. Even with internet access and technology, it can be hard when we don't have that face-to-face interaction, and we might get that cabin fever sensation because we're in the same place all day long. And it's very easy to get in the same habit of just staying in all day long and not even venturing out. So it's important to recognise that. Collaborating can be really hard. In the office, it's really easy and straightforward to ask colleagues for a question or an update because you're in the same room, or it might just be a quick walk down the corridor. But when you're remote working, you don't have this, especially if you've started a new job remotely and you have questions, but there's no one to ask this question of. And it's much more difficult to make that interaction or ask that question remotely or virtually. Social interaction can be more difficult. Interacting with other people is a really positive aspect of many people's jobs. Yes, of course, you're there to work, but social contact is also a really valuable and important part of work that can really help with productivity. Another aspect which we often have struggled with is technical difficulties. So there's nothing like disruption to technology to make you shake with fear if you have a deadline or if you have an online presentation like this. So if your computer breaks, or I've had in one webinar, unfortunately I didn't have my power cable plugged in, and mid-webinar the power was going to die, and it was all of a sudden, what do I do? I've got to carry on and pretend like nothing's happening, but I need to make sure I put the power source in. So technical difficulties are another ball game that we have to completely think about, and that might be something that we're not used to, and it can cause some problems for us to solve. Another factor is maybe developing some bad health habits. When you're at home, it's much easier to slip into bad habits. For one, you have a fridge very close to you, or you might have the opposite problem because maybe you shared lunch breaks with other people, and without that you might not bother eating. Also, lack of exercise. It might fall by the wayside, especially if you're overworking, and you might just forget to go outside very much, and that's not good for your physical or mental health. So what I've created here is a 5 areas model, which is a really common way of breaking down the experience of particular challenges or difficulties that we might be experiencing. And I thought it might be helpful here to see how we can fall into a bit of a vicious cycle within our home working life. So I've put in the top part of the model in the life events section is some of the challenges of home working. So constant interruptions, lack of human interaction, frequent technical disruptions, and that can lead us to feel quite frustrated and have some negative thoughts, thoughts that might be like, I can't face it right now, or I don't have the time right now. It might also be concerned about taking a break because of the fear of colleagues thinking that you're slacking. Those thoughts will have a knock-on effect on how we feel physically in terms of how tired we feel, impacting on our sleep if we're laying awake worrying about these things. We may notice a loss of energy or a loss of motivation. We might find that we're experiencing more tension or aches and pains. And some of the behavioural changes we might notice, I've already mentioned in the previous slide, but we might be snacking more, we might be working too much, we might not be going out of the house, we might be avoiding interaction or starting to procrastinate. And these behaviours will reinforce the thoughts that we're having and fear as well about what our colleagues think, but also they're going to reinforce these behaviours. These emotions. So we're more likely to feel bored, overwhelmed, lonely, stressed and down. And it's important to recognise that we can get caught in a bit of a vicious cycle with our thoughts and behaviour. And so in our webinar today, we're really going to give you some tips and techniques to try and break into this vicious cycle and hopefully prevent us from falling down this route of avoidance or procrastination and not getting out of the house. So we're going to be thinking a bit about that today. So before we do that, it's really important to think about the benefits of working from home, because whilst there are a lot of challenges, we may also be enjoying some aspects of it. And so I wanted to hear from you some of the benefits that you're finding about working from home. So please share with me some of your thoughts on the benefits that you're finding. Some of the thoughts I had were no commute, so you gain some extra time. You don't have to pack up and go anywhere. You just literally wake up, get ready, and you're there. You don't have to go anywhere in particular. You don't have to plan for a full day, and this is particularly helpful in that you don't have to think about packing up, and you don't have to think about what you need later on. You don't need to prepare for lunch because it's all there. You're not going anywhere. You don't have to prepare a packed lunch. You can have a home cooked lunch if you wish, if that's something that you enjoy doing. You can be more flexible with your schedule if your employer is happy with that, and you can get odd jobs done around the house. If you have a wash that you need to put on, it takes a couple of minutes, and then when it's ready you can take it out when it's done. And it may mean that you get to spend more time with your family as well. And so there are some really great benefits about working from home, and it's important to recognise those. So let's have a look at the benefits that you're finding about working from home. So I'm going to come across to those now. Can wake up later, no commute, more sleep, being able to exercise without a 5 AM start, brilliant. No commute, which takes up a lot of time, seeing my partner more, escaping the long commute, no more tube, saving costs on travel. You can get stuff delivered easily. Oh, that's one I definitely hadn't thought about, but that is great benefit. You're around the family and pets, company of my retired partner. Really good to have time to exercise by just walking or anything else. Better healthy lunches, not having to get dressed and put makeup on. Healthier as I exercise before work. I get a cooked breakfast and lunch, no commute, save money on bus fare, no social anxiety about colleagues, can hang out washing at lunchtime, brilliant. So there are so many benefits, and I can see that there's a lot more that I'd love to go through, but you know, whilst there are those challenges and difficulties, there are things that we are getting from it, and many people are hoping that part of working from home can continue, and the option to work from home is an option for more people. However, I want to consider the impact of home working, and survey findings captured during the first 2 weeks of lockdown found that home working has had an impact on physical and mental well-being. And I'll talk to you now about the areas in which it has impacted potentially you and many of you. So within the first 2 weeks of lockdown, there was a significant increase in musculoskeletal complaints. So more than half of the survey respondents reported new aches and pains, especially in the neck and shoulders and back, compared to their normal physical condition. They also reported that their diet and exercise were on the wane, and admitted to an increase in alcohol consumption, and a third reported a less healthy diet and acknowledged that they were exercising less. So there are some significant health implications if we allow it to continue that way. So the advice from the Health and Safety Executive is to make sure that your home office is set up safely and in an ergonomic way, and that you are mobile and that you take regular exercise. There is a really useful video here on the Health and Safety Executive to help you make sure that your workstation is set up properly. So it's no good just setting up an ad hoc desk and using random chairs or propping things up to just make do. I know a lot of us thought that this was only going to be short term, and so we may not have invested in a proper desk and a working environment, home working environment, but it's really important that we do think about where we're working and making sure that we are comfortable and not causing ourselves further pain or injury. So the main tips from the Health and Safety Executive are to break up long spells of working with rest breaks, at least 5 minutes every hour, and to change our activity regularly where possible. To avoid awkward static postures by regularly changing position, and to get up and move or do stretching exercises as well. And to avoid eye fatigue by changing your focus or blinking from time to time as well. Try to have your workspace in a different area than your bedroom. If that's not possible because you're house sharing, we would suggest that you don't work from your bed, but to sit away from your bed and set up a small area for work only. Research has found that it has a negative effect on your sleep because it creates a negative association with your bed. If you are working from bed when you're trying to go to sleep, it's easy to slip back into thoughts and worries about work, and that can have an impact on your sleep quality. I know that's not possible for all of you, but it's trying as much as possible to create a space for you and moving things around if possible to make a space where you can work without using your bed, ideally outside of your bedroom. We do recommend that you stick to a routine as much as possible, including getting out of bed, brushing your teeth and getting dressed. So rather than waiting in bed right up until your time to start work, and then just rocking up to your desk, it's better that you give yourself a bit of time to wake up. Obviously, you don't have to have as much time as you would have needed before, but still doing those basic my mind's gone blank. Remembering to do those things that to look after ourselves, making sure that we do look after our hygiene. Make sure that you're meeting your basic needs. So to continue to function at your best, you need to get enough rest and respite. So this means taking regular breaks, making sure that you nourish your body regular times throughout the day. So no more skipping through lunch breaks or meals and just working through. You need to pause and take moments out of your day to not focus and to relax. And eat regular healthy meals. Don't rely on caffeine and sugar to get you through. Whilst it does give you that rush of energy, it wears off quickly. And plan time away from your desk, whether that is in another room or somewhere out of the house or flat. And make sure you stick to your working hours. Avoid the tendency to do more work or let work spill into your home life. But it's equally important to be aware of that tendency to procrastinate or get distracted by non-work related activities such as housework or house admin or watching TV. When planning your routine, you want to take into account both of the challenges and the benefits of working from home. So problem solve those difficulties and challenges and try and work around them and make the most of those benefits that make working from home worthwhile to you. It's okay to be flexible and make the most of working from home as long as you get the right balance and still fit all of your work within your working hours. We can look at this a bit like we might look at sharpening a saw. So when we take time out to sharpen the saw, it prevents the edge of the saw from becoming blunt. So often in our lives, we can just push through despite feeling fatigued or lacking in energy or feeling exhausted because we've got so much to do. But actually what we need to do is to stop. Even though we've got a huge pile of work to do, it's just to pause, to take a break, sharpen our personal saw in order to sharpen our senses and to make sure that we are working at our best, and prevent ourselves from working with a blunt saw. Another tip that might be quite useful is to do something to replace your commute, to signify the start and end of your working day. So the reason why I'm suggesting this is because we might have that tendency to lie in, and I've done it many times, right up until we need to get up ready for our working day. Whereas we've gained that time where we no longer have to commute. So why not use that to do something beneficial for us, that rejuvenates and refreshes us. So whether it's dancing in your kitchen or going for a walk around the block, or doing some mindfulness or yoga, or perhaps reading a book. Not only will you then make the most of that extra time from not commuting, but it also communicates to you when your working day starts and ends, and it kind of keeps it more contained if you plan in an activity to start it and end it. Also, check in with your work colleagues virtually, whether it's through video meeting, calls or emails. All formal meetings will have been transferred to digital meetings. However, those water cooler chats, those after work drinks, the lunchroom discussions do not transfer so easily. So when you've had a difficult day, it's much harder to lean on your colleague or manager for support, as there is not only that physical distance, but it also feels less natural than an ad hoc conversation over a cup of coffee. It's much easier to feel isolated from our colleagues, so we need to find ways to connect socially with our colleagues. So if that's not already happening in your team, then think about how you can encourage that kind of environment, perhaps champion social connection and suggest activities that you can do to connect with your team members more regularly. And once you have finished working, it's really important that you pack up your work materials, especially if you're working in the same room that you're sleeping in, and have a clean finish to the day. Turn off all your email notifications. And it might be useful to set an alarm if you know that you're one to get completely absorbed in work and you lose track of time. Then have an alarm set so it signals the end of your working day. Perhaps plan an activity to do straight after you finish work to take your attention away from work and help you switch off from work. Perhaps do something outside of the house if possible, and then come back to your home after that activity. And the most important thing is to then not go back to work, to not check your emails, as it's easy to get drawn in. If you open up your laptop again and read your emails, it's more likely that you'll get back into working again. It can be easy to let work and home life merge, so be strict with yourself and stick to the routine that you plan for yourself. And if you've planned a routine that's working for you, then try and stick to it as much as possible so that you're balancing your work and home life much better. So in order to create a positive work-life balance, we may need to think about the other areas of our lives outside of work that support us. So most of us have many different areas that make up our lives, such as our family, work, hobbies, friends, etc. And there are a number of advantages to having a lot of areas that support us, and we can see it a bit like we might see scaffolding to support a house. when a house is in repair, that scaffolding supports it. And it can be the same with our lives. If one area of our life is in difficulty, if we have other areas that make up our lives, then we feel more supported. So in this way, we need to build a framework to help us cope better with the changes that we are experiencing. And it can be it can be really helpful to think about those different areas and how much time we allocate to each. And we may find that we're allocating quite a significant amount of time to work. And so it might be that we need to build up the rest of our lives around our work, especially if we're feeling really overwhelmed with the demands of work. So, for example, person A, so this person only has two areas that make up their lives, their work and their relationship. So when this person begins to experience difficulties at work, they then only have one area to support them. And because of that, they feel like a lot more of their life is in turmoil. And they will then rely more on that relationship to support them with those challenges. However, person B, on the other hand, if they experience difficulties at work, they have a much wider range of support available to them to help them cope with the situation. And it feels like a much smaller chunk of their life is in turmoil because they have so many other areas that might be going really well. It doesn't completely define them in that one area doesn't completely define them. So we really think it would be beneficial for you to identify the areas in your life that support you and try and create, if you don't have many, then it's thinking about building your scaffolding and building more of these areas that support you and uplift you, so that when there are challenges in work, it's not the end of the world. There are other things that give you a sense of value and meaning. So another thing that we might want to think about is time management. As we come to more of a working from home, remote working lifestyle, we are more responsible for managing our time. And if that's not something we're used to, it might be useful to identify some strategies that help us. And improving your time management at work provides one of the fastest, easiest and most effective strategies for enhancing your performance and achieving your goals. And the benefits of effective time management are endless, and the positive effects of managing time will help you to stay on top of your daily tasks and get more done within your job role, and hopefully create more time for the scaffolding. So if at the minute when I was talking about scaffolding you were thinking, well, I already don't have enough time for anything else, then use some time management strategies to create more time, to build in those areas of your life that will support you to cope better. And also remember the sharpening the saw analogy, because in the long term, actually taking time out to look after yourself is going to make you function better at work. So we have 10 time management strategies here in this slide deck that I'm not going to talk through now, as I'll probably bore you to death by going through them, but they're here for you to read through and to try out. So, you know, go through the list and over this next week or two, just think about which ones you're going to try and implement and see how you get on with those. So here's the final 5 here. And here we have Eisenhower's urgent important matrix, and this is a really useful strategy to help you to identify activities that you should focus on, as well as those activities that you should ignore. And when you use this tool to prioritize your time, it can really help you deal with the truly urgent issues at the same time as working towards your longer term goals. So it's really useful to use this tool and start by listing all of the tasks and activities that you have to do, and then put them into each of these 4 categories. For instance, We have the important and urgent category, and this is the crises. This is where it's really important to get these things done, and these are things that you perhaps couldn't predict that they would happen, or maybe you've left them to the last minute, and so they have to get done right here and now. And these are things that we have to manage right now, and they are relatively short term, so they will be over. We also have the important but not urgent, and this is kind of the planning and activity scheduling, so planning your routine. And these are activities that help you to achieve your long and mid-term goals, but they're not necessarily pressing for attention. And because of that, we can often put them off because we have other more urgent things to deal with. And so we neglect the planning, we neglect these important but not urgent activities, which could actually make us more efficient and more productive with our actual work. And then we have the not urgent but and not important quadrant. So these are activities that are neither important for achieving your goals or urgent. They are distractions essentially, and they can distract you from the things that matter. And then the final quadrant is the urgent but not important. So these are generally interruptions. They're things that sap your time and energy, but they actually don't contribute to those longer term benefits. So they're essentially keeping you busy but have no real value. So we've got here a list of examples that I'm not going to talk through now, but it's really useful to identify what on your to-do list and where they fit in each of these quadrants, and try and prioritize using this matrix to help you to achieve more of the things that are meaningful and important to you. And try limiting yourself to no more than 8 tasks per quadrant. So if you've got 8 in there, then don't add any more until you've taken any out, and complete the most important one first. It's not about collecting tasks, it's about finishing them, but this process will help you to prioritize. And I want to talk to you a little bit about procrastination. Procrastination essentially means putting off something that we know that we need to do. And some people most people procrastinate to some extent. We've all said at some point, I'll do it later, or I'll get around to doing that later, but some people habitually procrastinate, and things can start to build up to a point where it can feel extremely stressful. So it can be really helpful to identify whether or not we are procrastinating, and there are a number of reasons why people procrastinate. For example, lacking a sense of mastery. So you might hold the belief that successful people achieve their goals without frustration and self-doubt, and you might think that this is not how it should be, whereas people who are consistently successful have a sense of mastery, which basically means that they assume life will be tough and frustrating, so when it is, they just carry on because that's what they expected. Also, we can assume that we have to be in the mood. Procrastinators often think, I don't feel like it, I'll wait until I'm in the mood. But with some of the things that are really boring or maybe too demanding, you will never feel like you're in the mood. Successful people will often put action before motivation. And often once you've started, that sense of accomplishment builds and it spurs you on to do more. Perhaps it's the fear of failure that is making you procrastinate. You might leave the task until the last minute and then say, oh well, I didn't have enough time to do it properly. And by doing so, you give yourself an excuse and protect yourself from the reality that your best effort might not have been good enough. And this might also link with perfectionism. And so that fear of failure. So we'd rather avoid something than actually face the failure. Or maybe it's the fear of rejection or intimacy. So you might avoid inviting friends around or making a phone call in case you get rejected. Or you might keep people at a distance because you don't want them to get to know you. So procrastination helps you feel safer because it keeps people at a distance. Or maybe it's the fear of success. You may feel that if you do something really well, then you'll draw attention to yourself and create more work. You might worry about being able to manage this extra responsibility or pressure. Whatever your reasons for procrastinating, it's important to weigh up whether or not it's helpful for you. So I have an exercise here for you to try out, to ask yourself how it helps you, because obviously it's got to help you in some way, otherwise you wouldn't continue with it. But also it's worthwhile considering whether or not it's hindering you or holding you back in any way. And once you've worked that out, if you do decide to change and no longer procrastinate, what will be good about that? What will you gain? But also, what will be bad? And is there a loss? Will you lose anything if you no longer procrastinate? And if you decide as a result of trying this exercise that actually you would like to make some changes to your habit of procrastinating, then we encourage you to put it into action. Here's a way that you can action your change in your procrastination. So start by identifying the problem, which might be changing my procrastination habit will mean people will expect more from me. There will be more pressure and responsibility on me to do things. So that might be a fear that's keeping you procrastinating. So then identify some self-talk that might help you push through that fear, and by telling yourself that you can choose what things to commit to and that you can gradually build up and that those expectations aren't going to change overnight. And then how are you going to put that into action? Well, for example, keep going with doing rather than putting off. And if someone puts pressure on you to commit to something that you're not ready for, then talk to them about it. So hopefully that gives you a little bit of a taster into how to deal with procrastination if you're finding that it's something that you're struggling with, and maybe that's interfering with your management of your work at home. And then finally, just a small mention about working from home with children. And we just have some ideas here about how to manage this. We recommend using digital learning for children, so see if your school has any online resources. Maybe create a timetable for you and your children so that they know when you're available and when you're not available. And I remember someone shared with me that them and their partner and they had post-it notes on the back of their chair to say who was available and who wasn't, because they were both home working. And so it's a really good way so they could see who they could talk to and ask questions of. Obviously that works with older children and not so well with younger children. But find a routine that works, and remember to add breaks for you and for them. And break up your time with walks in the garden, open the window for fresh air, change rooms, and do relaxation exercises together. There are some ideas here for some further resources to aid learning, but the final, probably most important tip is when you are looking after your children, be present. Try and keep work and parental responsibilities as separate as possible. If they're merging, then you're not going to feel effective at work and you're not going to feel a very great parent. So try and block your time where you're really focused with work and where you're really focused with your children, and try and be present in both areas rather than trying to juggle things at all times. Obviously, wherever possible, try and involve other people, your partner, to help with that, or perhaps get other family members involved, even if you can't see them. For instance, my husband and I have asked our in-laws to help with our daughter over Zoom. So they taught a lesson to my daughter over Zoom and she really enjoyed that. So do things like that, be creative. So some take-home messages for you today. Make sure that the home office setup is safe and ergonomic and that you are mobile and take exercise. Create a routine that works for you and your family, and is flexible, but also blocked, so that you know when you're doing things, and so that the rest of your family also know when you're doing things. Build a scaffolding to support you and create more of a positive work-home life balance. Try some of the time management strategies and have a go at prioritising some of the tasks in your life according to the urgent and important analysis. And also identify if you are procrastinating and consider how changing this habit may impact you. So what I'd like you to do now is to go into the comments section of the Q&A and select one of these ideas from today's webinar that you're going to action this week. So choose A if you're going to work out your office setup and make changes. B if you're going to focus on creating a new routine for you. C if you're going to build more of a scaffolding. Or D if you're going to try some time management strategies. E if you're going to prioritise some of the tasks in your life. Or F if you're going to focus on changing your procrastination habit. So if you do that now, and also we will have a couple of minutes at the end of the webinar to answer any of your questions. So if any of you do have a question that you would like to ask me, write it in the comments now in the Q&A, and I will come to those questions at the end of the webinar, which will just be in a few slides. So here is a slide for you to try it for yourself. So if you thought that the 5 areas was quite helpful and you want to have a go at identifying your own 5 areas model and try and break down that vicious cycle that maybe you're experiencing with your mood, then have a look at, use this, and it has some prompt questions here to help you. Here we have further webinars scheduled, so register for those here. And yeah, there's quite a few over the next couple of weeks. So if you want to learn more about managing low mood, or financial anxiety, or sleeping better, or perhaps we also have a BAME community wellbeing management webinar as well. So sign up to those and learn a bit more about managing your wellbeing in other areas. So if you feel like you need more support, IAP services are fantastic national free services available to you if you're struggling with anxiety or depression, and you can find that a local service to you using this link here by typing your postcode in, and you can find a mental health service that supports you, that can support you, and don't feel like you have to be really unwell to access these services. They offer treatment for mild to moderate mental health difficulties, so please reach out and get the support that you need. If you need more urgent support for your mood, if you're having thoughts of suicide or harming yourself, then please reach out, and we encourage you to talk to your GP if you can. But if you can't, and you can't wait for that, then we recommend the Samaritans or Shout. You can text them on 85258, or if you're not sure what help is available, then you can go to this link here where you can find the NHS urgent support guidance. We also have other useful resources and links here. So if you feel like you need more support, then have a look through these links, and that will you might find something of use. We would love to hear your feedback from today's webinar and how you found it. So we're going to copy and paste this into the Q&A, so you can click on it and then go to the feedback survey and let us know how you found the webinar today. And that is everything from me. We just have a couple of minutes now for some questions. So I'm going to scroll down to the bottom. First, I'm going to look at your poll responses, and then I'm going to have a look at if you've got any questions. Okay, so most of you, it looks quite equally split actually. It looks like most of you are going to try time management strategies. Oh, actually, no. Most of you are going to look at your procrastination habit. So I'm glad I included that, and hopefully that's helpful. But yes, whether it's time management or prioritising the tasks in your life, it's really important to find a way to make working from home work for you. Okay, so I have a question here about, I feel like I need to be visible on Teams at all times and immediately responsive to emails and chats. Any tips on how not to feel guilty when I get away from the computer? Okay, well, first of all, I would encourage you to rethink how you're responding to emails anyway and chats, because I know for myself, if I have email notifications on or chat notifications on, if I'm in the middle of doing something, it can easily distract me from the task that I'm working on. And that means that I'm less effective, because my attention keeps getting taken away and then brought back, and then taken away and brought back. But every time you try and re-engage in the task that you were working on before the interruption, it takes a bit longer and you're less effective. And so I would recommend anyway, regardless of the guilt that you feel, I would recommend blocking out time. So have a routine, block out time when you're focused on a project, and then block out time where you will respond to emails and chats. And that way you'll get through queries and questions and problems on email and chat much quicker than you will if you're going between, and you'll be much more efficient and focused with the task, that the actual work that you need to do. And I suppose being aware that emails and chats do come under the urgent but not important. I mean, sometimes emails and chats are urgent and important, but they can often take over the rest of our tasks. So I would recommend to remember that when you do come away from the computer, but also to get into the habit of blocking out your time anyway with work and responding to email and chats, and perhaps let your team members know that that is what you're doing, so that if you don't respond straight away, they will know that it's because you're working on a project. I hope that's helped. Create and maintain a routine for work time and mummy time. Yes, this is really important for you to feel like you're managing both, because obviously there are two aspects that are pulling you, and if you don't create that routine for your work and for your mummy time, you will feel torn in both ways. And so try and sit down and schedule with your partner, or if you're on your own, then try and work out a schedule where you can schedule your most important pieces around nap time or around a bit of TV watching. Don't feel guilty about a bit of TV watching. It is going to be essential if you're working from home on your own as a mum. So just try and juggle it where possible. How can we deal with the pressure from work in terms of current working from home arrangements and the pressures being put on us to return to the office? I guess this is a tricky one, because obviously before COVID we were all pretty much working in offices, and so this is quite a big change that we're all working from home, and many of us actually are finding it really beneficial. Whilst there are challenges, there are also a lot of benefits, and so I suppose it's having just, hopefully your work is considering making things more flexible anyway, but that might not be the case. And so having honest discussions with your manager about how effective you are at home and how it works better for you is probably best, rather than avoiding those discussions, and they won't necessarily know how much you or your team members value working from home. I suppose we need to expect that our employers will expect us to come back to work at some point, and we don't know how much that will be, and so it's just weighing up how we approach that with them. And problem solving that. That is probably all I have time for today. I'm really sorry, I'd love to go through some more of your questions, but hopefully you found today's webinar helpful and you've gone away with some really useful strategies that you can put into place to make working from home more manageable and more bearable, but also to make the most of the benefits, but mitigating those challenges as well. But if you wish to come to any more of our webinars, please register. It's been so lovely to have so many of you respond and interact today. Thank you for your time, and we look forward to seeing you again soon.